This is Linda Favla with the book Lamentations of the Old Testament of the Bible. We'll do what we've been doing. We'll read the entire book without skipping anything, and every few verses we'll comment. We use the World English Bible because it's not copyrighted and it's very accurate to the original Hebrew. The World English Bible has the quirk of using Yahweh as God's name. The explanation of it is that when John Wycliffe produced the first English translation of the Bible in the 1300s, he translated the names to an English form. For example, he made Avraham into Abraham, Ishaq into Isaac, and so forth. But when he came to God's name, instead of keeping it at least something close to the Hebrew, he completely changed it to Lord. The World English Bible gives it more like the Hebrew of it, which is Yahweh. Our name, Land of Havilah, comes from Genesis 2:11. It's a paradise abounding in everything that's good and desirable. About this book, Lamentations, other than the crucifixion, it's maybe the heaviest part of the Bible. Why? The highway patrol doesn't mind when we slow down to look at an accident because the sight of it is good for us. So it's good to contemplate the wreckage of Israel. We'll be reminded how important it is to repent. So here we go, Lamentations chapter 1. How the city sits solitary that was full of people. She has become as a widow who was great among the nations. She who was a princess among the provinces has become a slave. She weeps bitterly in the night. Her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers, she has no one to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They've become her enemies. Judah has gone into captivity because of affliction and because of great servitude. She dwells among the nations. She finds no rest. All her persecutors overtook her within the straits. Comment: the situation in the Old Testament leading up to this book is that God kept warning Judah and Jerusalem to repent, but they wouldn't. He told them through the prophets what the consequences of sin would be, but they didn't listen. So God followed through. He whistled for invaders, Isaiah 5:25-30. The invaders came and killed some, carried away the rest, and the land was left practically empty, Jeremiah 52. In verse 1 we just read, the city of Jerusalem sits solitary. She's a widow because her people are all gone. They're either dead or they've been captured for slaves and taken to foreign lands. In verse 2, among all Jerusalem's lovers, she has no one to comfort her. Her lovers are her foreign gods and idols, Jeremiah 3:1-2. And they're also the foreign nations that she looked up to and depended on for defense, Ezekiel 23:5. Her lovers are also anything else her people were enamored with, their positions, their possessions, whatever. She fell on hard times, and her lovers were useless. In verses 2 and 3, Jerusalem weeps bitterly in the night. Tears come down her cheeks, and there's no one to wipe them. Her friends have dealt treacherously with God, which means her people have double-crossed God, and now there's nothing left of them. In verse 3, her pursuers overtook her in the straits. This gives the picture of her being trapped in a tight spot and destroyed. Coming up, Zion is another word for Jerusalem, verse 4. The roads to Zion mourn because no one comes to the solemn assembly. All her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh. Her virgins are afflicted, and she herself is in bitterness. Her adversaries have become the head. Her enemies prosper, for Yahweh has afflicted her for the multitude of her transgressions. Her young children have gone into captivity before the adversary. All majesty has departed from the daughter of Zion. Her princes have become like deer that find no pasture. They've gone without strength before the pursuer. Comment: in verse 4, the roads to Jerusalem should be packed on holidays with people coming to the temple to worship, but now the roads mourn because there's no one on them. In verse 4 and in all the Bible, virgins means innocent and unmarried young ladies. It's difficult to contemplate the young Jewish girls right now. They should be with their families, rejoicing and lighthearted on the roads as they go up to Jerusalem to observe a feast day. But the brutal reality is that they're either dead or scattered among the nations as slaves, doing their master's bidding. In verse 5, the same is true for all the young children. Yahweh has afflicted the people for their transgressions. But Yahweh would never do something like that. Oh, yes, he did. We can react to it however we will. We can be angry with him. We can say if that's the way things are, he mustn't exist. We can call him unjust. We'd be wrong about all that. But yes, he did afflict them. In verse 6, without God there is deathly thirst. We will be miserable, and there's no strength to combat the pursuer. We will be overcome. Verse 7. Jerusalem remembers in the days of her affliction and of her miseries all her pleasant things that were from the days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the adversary, and no one helped her. The adversaries saw her, they mocked at her desolations. Jerusalem has grievously sinned, therefore she has become unclean. All who honored her despise her because they've seen her nakedness. Yes, she sighs and turns backward. Her filthiness was in her skirts. She didn't remember her latter end. Therefore she has come down astoundingly. She has no comforter. See, Yahweh, my affliction, for the enemy has magnified himself. The adversary has spread out his hand on all her pleasant things, for she has seen that the nations have entered into her sanctuary, concerning whom you commanded that they should not enter into your assembly. All her people sigh. They seek bread. They have given their pleasant things for food to refresh their soul. Look, Yahweh, and see, for I've become despised. Comment verses 7 to 11 reads something like, Now that Jerusalem is miserable, she remembers the good and pleasant days of the past. Alas, her people fell prey to their enemies, and no one helped her. They mocked her because she was empty and destroyed. Jerusalem has sinned grievously and is unclean. All who used to admire her now despise her, because her true character has been exposed. She sighs in recognition of what she's become. She's embarrassed to show her face, so she turns away. To her utter embarrassment, she stained her skirt in public. She never considered the consequences, therefore she's astounded now that she sees them. She has no one to comfort her. She says, Yahweh, please take note of my affliction and how the enemy has gloated over me. The adversary has groped her with his hand all over. She witnessed firsthand how the Gentiles violated her, trampled the holy sanctuary, and ravaged the assembly. All her people sigh. They traded away everything in exchange for bread to stay alive. She says, Look, Yahweh, and see how I've become an embarrassment to myself. She says, verse 12, Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow, which is brought on me, with which Yahweh has afflicted me in the day of his fierce anger. From on high he has sent fire into my bones, and it prevails against them. He has spread a net for my feet. He has turned me back. He has made me desolate, and I faint all day long. The yoke of my transgressions is bound by his hand. They are knit together. They've come up on my neck. He made my strength fail. The Lord has delivered me into their hands, against whom I'm not able to stand. The Lord has set at nothing all my mighty men within me. He has called a solemn assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord has trodden the virgin daughter of Judah as in a winepress. For these things I weep. My eye runs down with water, because the Comforter, who should refresh my soul, is far from me. My children are desolate because the enemy has prevailed. Comment, the widow Jerusalem is the speaker in verses 12 to 16. She says something like, All you who pass by, it amazes me how you see me in this condition, but you don't think it through. My condition is like nothing to you, but it should shake you to the core. Take a look at me. Is there any sorrow like mine with which Yahweh afflicted me in the day he finally got angry with me? He rained fire from on high all the way into my bones. It's a fire from which no one recovers. He caught me, and there was no escape. He stopped me in my tracks. He desolated me. I spend all day on the edge of passing out. He laid the yoke of my own transgressions on me. My sins are linked to each other, binding my neck tight all around and all the way up. He made my strength fail. He gave me to my enemies. I have no power to defend myself against them. The Lord canceled all the power of all the mighty men within me, so that the sum of their power was nothing. He commanded an army to gather for the solemn purpose of crushing my young men. He has trodden the beloved city like treading grapes. For these things I weep. My eyes run with tears, because God, my Comforter, is far from me. My people have nothing. They're completely ruined, because the enemy has prevailed. The voice of narration says, verse 17, Zion spreads out her hands. There's no one to comfort her. Yahweh has commanded concerning Jacob that those who are around him should be his adversaries. Jerusalem is among them as an unclean thing. Comment in verse 17, the widow Jerusalem spreads out her hands in a gesture that says, what do I do now? All is lost, but there's no one to comfort her. In verse 17, Jacob is Israel, Genesis 32:28. Yahweh has commanded that Jacob be surrounded by enemies who detest him as unclean and want nothing to do with him except destroy him. The widow Jerusalem says, verse 18, Yahweh is righteous, for I have rebelled against his commandment. Please hear, all you peoples, and see my sorrow. My virgins and my young men have gone into captivity. I called for my lovers, but they deceived me. My priests and my elders gave up the spirit in the city, while they sought for food for themselves to refresh their souls. Look, Yahweh, for I'm in distress. My heart is troubled. My heart turns over within me, for I've grievously rebelled. Abroad the sword bereaves, at home it's like death. They've heard that I sigh. There's no one to comfort me. All my enemies have heard of my trouble. They're glad that you've done it. You'll bring the day that you've proclaimed, and they'll be like me. Let all their wickedness come before you. Do to them as you've done to me for all my transgressions. For my sighs are many, and my heart is faint. Comment in verses 18 to 22, the widow Jerusalem says something to the effect, none of this is Yahweh's fault. He's completely in the right. It's my fault for rebelling. Please pay attention, all you people, and see my sorrow. My young girls and boys have gone into captivity. During the siege and famine, I called to my most trusted and beloved, to the priest who should have helped me, but there was no help to be had. They were either looking for bread or dead already from not finding any. Look at my distress, Yahweh. Consider my broken heart. Consider how my heart aches because of my heinous rebellion. There's death everywhere, outwardly by the sword and inwardly by death itself. There's no one to comfort me. There's no hiding my grief from my enemies. It's obvious I'm ruined, and they're glad of it. But as you said, their turn will come. Be mindful of their wickedness. Do to them for their sins as you've done to me for my sins. For my sighs are many, and my heart faint. That's the chapter. It's not noticeable in English, but in Hebrew it's interesting that chapters 1, 2, and 4 are written as acrostics of the Hebrew alphabet, meaning there are 22 verses in each of those chapters, one verse for each letter of the Hebrew alphabet. All the first verses of those chapters start with Aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. All the second verses start with Beit, which is the second letter, and so forth to the last verse of each of those chapters, which starts with the last letter of the alphabet, which is Tav. Chapter 3 is an exception, but it's still an acrostic. The first 3 verses start with Aleph, the next 3 with Beit, and so on, to the last 3 verses that start with Tav. So instead of there being 22 verses, 1 for each letter, there are 66 verses, 3 for each letter. Chapter 5 is the last chapter and only chapter that's not an acrostic, but it still has 22 verses in keeping with the number of letters in the alphabet. In total, the book goes through the alphabet 6 times, and at the end there's another set of 22 verses, which makes 7 sets of 22, 7 being the Hebrew number of perfection or completion. There's a lesson in those numbers that we shouldn't lament something forever. When Lamentations are complete, they're complete. There's not another word that can be said that will add anything constructive. Mourning is appropriate, but at some point it's only right to make an end and completion of it. 2 Samuel 12:23. And one more note of interest, in Hebrew there's a rhythm or poetic meter that repeats itself in this book, with one line that has 3 stressed syllables followed by a line that has 2 stressed syllables. It doesn't come out that way in translation, of course. There's supposedly something sad about that 3-2 rhythm, like 3 sobs followed by 2 sighs or something to that effect. Lamentations 2 is next.